soon as possible. Honorable Speaker, the other issue was raised by the member for Turkana South on the capacity of our police agencies to maintain law and order. Honorable Speaker, I am persuaded that Kenya has enough police officers and enough wherewithal to handle all our challenges, including the challenges we are facing in northern Kenya. However, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it is the position of this government that there is need to reform our national security organs to make sure that they respond better to our threats. That is why one of the first acts His Excellency the President undertook was to institute a presidential task force on reforming the National Police Service, which is an admission that there is need to reform around command, around efficiency, and around operational sophistication to make sure that the gaps that we continue to exist, to encounter in our law enforcement of our internal security are resolved. Very shortly, that task force will present its findings. The government has committed to implement all the recommendations without exception that will come from that task force, including changing the entire command of the National Police Service, the terms under which one becomes a commander of any level, tying command to success and results and deliverables, so that you don't become a county commander, a regional commander for life, and there are no results. People are still having insecurity in your area. Make it time-bound and tied to results. And even that reform, even as we wait for those recommendations, we are continually addressing command issues to ensure efficiency. Even this afternoon, I think the government and the National Police Service will be announcing changes in the top command of the National Police Service, starting with the appointment of the Deputy Inspector General of the Kenya Police Service, whose recruitment process is complete. And we have had a gap there for a long time because the immediate former Deputy Inspector General of Police was indisposed. But from this afternoon, that gap is going to be filled, and that will help the Inspector General perhaps to respond a little better and quicker, even as we wait for the other reforms. Honorable Speaker, I have one other last one, the one that was raised around the issue of what measures we are taking to make sure that the gaps we are having are sealed. One, the House may want to know that in 2014, the government started a police equipment modernization program, which ran for 3-4 years, but stopped after that. It was to the tune of 10 billion shillings a year. It really helped to improve the security at that time. But due to the collapse of that funding program, we have had issues around our ability to make Kenya safer. And what this administration has done is to revive the police equipment modernization program. And for the next 3 years, the government of Kenya will spend 20 billion shillings to ensure that we modernize our equipment. I am happy to return here, if the House requires so, in 3 months, because by that time, in 3 months from now, I expect to have revived the police air wing, which is completely dead. I intend to have acquired at least 3 gunship helicopters for the National Police Service so that we stop depending on the military, because they also have a national duty to perform. I intend to acquire some unmanned armored vehicles, UAVs or drones, and going forward, increasingly, we are going to yield the benefits of technology-driven, intelligence-driven operations. I am happy to come back and report progress on this after a few months on the request of the House. I think, Honorable Speaker, That is it. Maybe if I've left anything, I'll be reminded, but...
Only one, far as soft power engaging...
Soft power, I agree. Honorable Speaker, I agree. Thank you for the reminder, sir. We believe that the long-term solution of this problem is not just the hardware, but we have made a policy decision that before we can engage on long-term solutions, including issues of economic empowerment and social amenities, we must silence the guns first. We must do whatever it takes to make it rare that there is an attack, there is there's gunfire everywhere. And after that, now we can sit down and ask ourselves, why is it that this problem is recurring all the time? The ministry has developed a master plan in conjunction with other stakeholders, including the military, for infrastructural development of northern Kenya, which will begin from December this year, rebuilding schools, providing amenities, and also engaging communities for peace building, and that will now come with both disarmament, forceful and voluntary. But first, before we engage in any of these programs, Mr. Speaker, we are persuaded that we must silence the guns. As soon as we acquire the equipment we are looking at as the National Police Service, there will be a lot of change. But even as we speak, we have made a lot of changes in evacuating the gorges, the valleys, and the hideouts. And the attacks that are happening now are attacking in the criminals who may have used the window we had given for evacuation of civilians so that we comply with international law. That allowed a few, in our view, to escape and mingle with populations. And they are the ones giving us problems, which we are resolving through NPR and through the technology that we are acquiring in the next few weeks or months. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, I know there's much more interest on this, but we have to move to the next question. Question 074 of 2023, Member for Gilgil, Mother Wangari.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 74 of 2023 to the Cabinet Secretary of Interior and National Administration. Number one, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why there is a shortage of birth registration materials, also known as B1 forms, in health facilities across the country? Number two, could the Cabinet Secretary explain why mothers in public hospitals, especially those on the national government Linda Mama program, are subjected to unnecessary detention after discharge as a result of unregistered births of their babies due to the above-mentioned shortage, yet it is the duty of the government to provide the B1 forms? And finally, what steps has the ministry taken to ameliorate the situation and ensure that mothers who are due for discharge are not forced to incur any additional bills due to the unjust detention in hospitals owing to the government's incapacity to promptly register births as a result of the lack of birth registration forms? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think this is a soft question.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, we admit that we have challenges in the availability of Form B1s. And this is a problem that started last year, around April 2022. And the challenge is arising from the capacity at the government press. The government press has not been modernized for a very long time. The equipment they have and the human resource capacity does not allow them to print enough security documents, including these forms, quick enough to meet the rising demand. Therefore, you will see in the response, the written response which I filed before this House, Mr. Speaker, I have attached 3 letters which we have written as a ministry to the government printer, requiring them to increase the speed at which they are supplying us with Form B1s. I can report to the House, Honorable Speaker, that the The demand right now the supply is 50 books of 400 forms per week, but the demand is over 1,000 books of that size. So you can see we are supplying less than, almost a third, less than half of the requirement. What measures are we taking? Other than writing letters, we have changed the management of the government printer because we also would believe that part of the challenge is the innovation of the leadership at that unit to provide off-balance sheet, off-budget solutions to some of the capacity challenges we are having. And I can report comfortably, after changing the management of the government press in the last 2 months, the new government printer has tabled, and I have approved, an equipment modernization program which will not even involve government spending any money, because it's through a lease of equipment where over time we will pay whoever owns those machines, and after 10 years we hand over the machines to him. That is the solution that helped us with police vehicles when the police leasing, vehicle leasing program was initiated. So we believe very soon that will be tackled. But in the meantime, we have asked the CRS, that is the Civil Registry Department or Unit, Civil Registry Service Department, to give the government printer the projections for the rest of the year. And we are working to see how, pending the modernization program I'm talking about, that demand can be met as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, finally, on that issue, I want to assure the House again that perhaps when I come back, the members will have positive feedback on this service, because we believe the registration of the births of our children and the deaths of our departed persons should not be aggravated further by absence of documents. The member for Gilgil has also asked whether the detention of young mothers in hospitals, especially under the Linda Mama program, is linked to the shortage of these booklets. The government's position is that this is not the case for 2 reasons, Honorable Speaker. Reason number 1 is that birth registration is free of charge. So it cannot be the purpose that makes a mother to be detained in hospital beyond the time she's supposed to be released. Secondly, why we believe this is not the cause is because the registration of births is allowed to take place within a period of 6 months after birth. So long as it's done within 6 months, it's lawful. So it cannot be the basis of saying, we hold a mother in hospital who has given birth because of lack of these booklets. That notwithstanding, when I got this parliamentary question, I have directed the civil registrar to provide us with a solution. Even as we wait for this equipment, we need to find a solution so that should the House require me to provide an update in the next few months, because the equipment program may take around 6 months because of the nature, the financing and the contractual arrangements, we will have an answer. Finally, Honorable Speaker, is that we have shortage of personnel. That's another challenge we are having in that department. We have only about 286 civil registrars for the whole country, against the establishment of approximately 1,400, which has been approved by the Public Service Commission. We are trying to see how, even if we don't fill the entire complement, the Public Service Commission can help us perhaps hire a few more in the financial year that starts June 2023.
Majority Leader, Wangari, you want to have your first shot? Let Majority Leader go first. I'll give you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, may commend the CS for being the first CS to appear in this session. But Honorable Speaker, you will and the House will appreciate that part of the reasons why we wanted CS to appear before the House is for them to answer to questions that are of concern to the people, but also to use this opportunity to expound on government policy, on what government is doing. Honorable Speaker, it has been my belief in the past, and maybe something the CS will work to change that belief in me, that the personification of bureaucracy in government and the personification of liturgy in government operations resides in the Ministry of Interior. And if you listened to the answers pertaining to the issues to do with bandits, and even now when I listen to the CS answer the question on slow printing of forms, I hear the CS telling us forms are slowly being printed by the government printer because of challenges of modernization in the government printer's office, challenges of employment, there are low staff levels in the department. When I also listen to the president who has hired the CS, the president is talking about digitization. So I really want to know from the CS, where do you sit as a cabinet secretary in terms of implementing that policy on the digitization of government services? Because you cannot be talking about low levels of staff while we are also complaining of a huge wage bill in the public service, when the president is telling us about digitization and the CS is telling us that he's modernizing printing. Shouldn't we then be getting this B1 form in a digital format? And I can see the PS Citizen Services is seated there. The PS Citizen Services have engaged with him on a unique identifier system that seeks to capture data of newborns digitally, electronically. But now the CS is telling us about modernizing the government printer, hiring another person at the government printer who will be more efficient, leasing equipment instead of buying new equipment. CS, you must tell us, where do you sit? Are you aligned to the president's agenda to digitize, or are you not? It is that simple. Cabinet Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was hoping that this would be a softer question because it has no guns, but I can see the guns are already coming out. But I want to just also thank the CS, congratulate him for being the first one in this very unique arrangement where we get answers firsthand instead of what we used to go about last parliament, 11th parliament, chairs who had no substantial answers. I have listened to the CS very carefully, and Mr. Speaker, this small matter of birth registration may look small, but the inconveniences it gets to people and to the public at large are huge. You want to take your child to grade 1 to register for NEMIS, you need a birth certificate. You want to get a passport, you will need a birth certificate. So, Mr. Speaker, I am actually perturbed to hear the CS say that he has written letters to the government printer, who is also anchored under the same ministry. I do not have the advantage of their nexus, so I will not speak to the letters. But my question is, follow-up question is, what are the timelines that we are looking at? And the reason I ask that, Mr. Speaker, is because shortages with birth registration, with death registration, shortages with IDs, printing materials are treated as normal. So my first question is, how does the civil registration services sit in the ministry in terms of budget allocation, in terms of autonomy, in terms of being able to run these services, Mr. Speaker? Number two,